Welcome to Midlife Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Mary Ellen Kingsland-Eckels, who is the founder and director of the Wallingford Community Theater, Wallingford Center for the Arts, and has a background as a music therapist. Welcome, Mary Ellen.
Hi, thank you for having us.
I'm delighted, and going back 12 years, you proposed a theater group for Wallingford.
I
Tell
did.
us a little bit about that.
Well, it really goes back to when I was about 18.
Okay.
And I had this dream of a barn and having arts there and people of all ages and abilities could come. And I kind of forgot about it. And then when I was about 50, the thought came back to me. And I thought to myself, well, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? So I put together a proposal, and I went to the town hall and had a meeting with the mayor and shared it with him. And he was very supportive, very encouraging, and we began from there.
And there's a strong mission.
Very strong mission. Been in the arts myself probably since I was 3. You see everything, the good, bad, the ugly. I really wanted this to be a place where people felt welcome, and that we recognized that every person has a gift. Everybody has something to bring to the table. For example, in the summer when we do the musical, whoever auditions and wants to be part of the show becomes part of the show. We don't cut in the summer at all. So that was really important. And it was important to me that, as it is now, it's multi-generational, and that people of all abilities, all people are welcome.
And you talk about a goal of having excellence without arrogance.
Yes, and that probably goes back to my years in theater and dance and everything else. I saw, especially not so much in high school, because we had amazing teachers at Lyman Hall, and I'm sure they would never stand for that. But once I got to the college level and I started getting into auditions, you started to see, it's really a form of insecurity, but you started to see such arrogance and cattiness and hurtfulness. And I wanted none of that. So I say that one of my mottos for the Wallingford Center for the Arts and for the Wallingford Community Theater is excellence without arrogance. You know, you don't need it. I've had the privilege of meeting some really amazing people through my lifetime, and Beverly Sills, the famous opera singer, Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, Dr. Louise Ames Bates, who was down at Yale for years. The thing that struck me about each of them was how brilliant, genius in their own fields they were, but very down to earth. The humility, the humbleness about them really struck me. It put me at ease, just a person off the street, happening to meet them, and made me feel welcome, and that we all had something worthwhile to give.
Wonderful.
Which was pretty amazing. I never forgot those lessons, and I was probably in my late teens, early 20s. I thought, well, that's how I want to be.
Wonderful. And you get a chance to do that. Now, for those who have not taken advantage of going to any of the productions or don't quite understand what the Center for the Arts in Wallingford is about, you could just kind of describe the structure. And
Wallingford Center for the Arts is something that I began as the general umbrella. And we have had an art show our first year, 12 years ago, at Choate, and they were very gracious to lend us all of their galleries, and they supplied a wine and cheese reception the first night. It was so successful. It's hard to, of course, do everything, and you learn that as you get older. But it showed me that there was a need out there for support, and we have so much in Wallingford. We don't see it necessarily. Everybody seems to have found their own corner to be in, their own little place to be in. But my dream is to create a Center for the Arts in Wallingford, where all these groups and the schools, all organizations in town could come and share what they're doing in the arts, whether it's an art exhibit or a poetry reading or storytelling, or a repertory theater. And we see, and I think I mentioned to you before, I did love sports. I was kind of a tomboy and a jock growing up myself, and love sports. I see such value in that. But what I see or saw anyway in Wallingford at the beginning was that that's all I was seeing. I saw these gorgeous fields, and I'm thrilled that we have them. I'm thrilled we have the flourishing sports teams that we have, but I wasn't seeing the balance to it. And I think that's what folks my age growing up, when you were at Lyman Hall, we were allowed to have a balance. And I think that's important. I think they both bring wonderful things to the individual and to the community. So I wanted to provide that, see if I could help provide that.
And I saw on Facebook some exciting news. You got the rights to Mathilda, which
did.
is one of my favorite
know.
movies that I watched with
And
my
the
daughter, and
book?
I watched by myself sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to be one of the first in the country?
Yes, I was so excited. I've been waiting for that, as have many others. I became aware that it was available. I was always waiting and had no idea it was coming. And suddenly I just went online. We have an agent in New York, and everything was pretty much filled out. We just had to say when and where, and we did, and held our breath, and we got it. So
Nice.
I know. And we'll be in one of the new auditoriums in the high schools.
Nice.
So they have all the new lighting and sound.
And ways for things to magically move, I hope, because that's a big part,
yeah,
right?
I know.
Yeah. Fun.
It's pretty cool. And we've got an amazing team. Matt Bennett is our technical director, and he's got a degree in that from Southern as well as acting. Dave Stein's our set designer. He's an architect with Silver Petroselli. He's a partner, and we're really blessed. You know, when things are supposed to happen, they do.
Yeah. Nice. Great to be part of that. Help make it happen.
Oh, it is fun.
Yeah.
It is. It's exciting. You just stand back. Like we had, when the show ends, they don't want to.
Right.
And I could look at my phone, and usually for repertory, we have a text and we'll have a string, and it's originally meant so that when I'm way out front during a show and they're backstage,
Right.
if there's any problem or something, we can text each other. But they use it for just being friends and socializing too. And the show will be over, and I'll come over to my phone. I've got like 47 texts, and it's all from them. But it's fun. We had a bowling party, very impromptu, and anybody in the theater who wanted to do it could come. And we were over at Colony Lanes, and I just stopped for a minute and looked, and there were all these families. I mean, the place was filled, and I was just, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
I mean, that felt good.
Yeah. And now in the last 5 years or so, you're at the state level.
Yes.
Okay. So my understanding is, so you've served on the State of Connecticut Education and Cultural Commission.
Economic development.
Oh, economic development.
Yeah.
Thank you. And now you're an officer on the Arts Council.
Yeah, I'm actually doing both.
Okay.
I was appointed first to the Commission for Economic Development, Culture, and Tourism, and I still serve on that. And at pretty much the same time, I was appointed to the Connecticut Arts Council and the Connecticut Arts Council Foundation. And about a year ago, they asked me if I would step in to be an officer, which I said yes.
Yeah. And so what type of initiatives do they tackle?
There's been a lot of tremendous energy, wonderful energy in the last year or so. We've got great leaders. I sit on the Economic Development, Tourism, Culture Commission, and I look around at the table and wonder how I got a seat at that table, because they're pretty amazing people. They're leaders nationally, and they happen to be in Connecticut. So I sit there and I open my ears. I try to learn as much as I can, and see what I can do. On the Connecticut Arts Foundation, there's a foundation and there's a council for each of those. Like there's an Economic Development Council, tourism. There's one on historic preservation. I sit on the arts, and we're doing all kinds of great new initiatives. One that's near and dear to my heart is taking a look at the arts and education. As we know, with tight budgets, it's so tempting to cut music or
Mm-hmm.
art, photography, anything else that the school might be offering. But the arts really, they teach so much more than artistic skills. They really teach us how to be the best human beings we can be,
Mm-hmm.
and how to bring that to a community. So it really teaches how to take our own individual skills and bring it to the table for the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very exciting. So I've been working with the wonderful staff members who work for the state up in Hartford with the schools, and how can, what's happening now? Is it working? How can we make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And some plans for the future. So that I'm really excited about.
Right. And that builds on your experience as a teacher, a music therapist, which you
Yes.
became when it was still a very early evolving field.
Yeah. I felt like I needed to wear a sandwich board because
Uh-huh.
everybody said, well, what is a music therapist?
Yeah.
And this was back in the late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about it. I was a music ed major at Western.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a wonderful professor, Dr. Louise Willerman, and she was amazing. And she kind of got me. She
Mm-hmm.
kind of saw that I wasn't that thrilled about music ed. It was a little too pedantic for me at
Mm-hmm.
that moment in my life. Now I don't know that I would feel that way, but
Mm-hmm.
at 18, 19, I certainly did. And she was assigning me my sophomore participation for my education degree, and she assigned me to a special ed class in Danbury, and I panicked. And I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, just do what you know. And I said, well, I only know music.
Mm-hmm.
She said, then go do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she would not let me off the hook. I mean, she knew, and she was such a wise woman,
Mm-hmm.
wise older woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went, and these kids were, the teacher was awesome, but the kids were very hyper, running around, not a lot of focus. And she said, why don't you sit down at the piano and see what happens?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden I sat down and I started like doing a sing-along at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't know anything about anything at that point except to play and sing. And I did. And all of a sudden they stopped and came and gathered and focused. And
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed.
Yeah.
And I went back to Dr. Willerman and I said, you're not going to believe what happened. And she said, well, she said, tell me. And I did. It was like talking to my mom.
Yeah.
My mom was an amazing educator. And she and my dad were like my first mentors
Mm-hmm.
and life mentors. She knew. And she said, well, there's a name for that. And I said, what? And she goes, music therapy. And I said, really? And she said, we have a few books on it in the library. So I devoured them,
Mm-hmm.
went out and bought my own, and never looked back.
So you applied that training and skills in both educational settings. You worked for Masonic here in Wallingford.
Yeah, I did. I started with the
Yeah.
state as a special ed teacher. I had to, I decided I wanted to get my undergrad degrees in as many of the arts as I could,
Mm-hmm.
that I, had any sort of skill set for.
Mm-hmm.
So I got music ed, and theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already had, 16 years of dance. So I figured
Mhm.
I had that covered. And then I had to go for certification in music therapy. And there was nothing in this part of the country. There still really isn't anything in this part of the country,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. But I was very fortunate. I met the one of four at the time music therapists in probably New England, but at least in Connecticut, Jean Tomat, who taught at University of Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
And she had me, she introduced me to a famous music therapist from France. I still have her book. I went to see her at a conference, and she signed the book, continued doing great work in music therapy.
Mhm.
And she snapped the book shut. She was like this big. She was
Mhm.
really small. And she said, she snapped it shut, and she looked at me, and she said, now go out and earn that.
Mhm. Wow.
And I tried. I did.
Yeah.
They were the ones who set me up with a mentoring system and a supervisor with the American Association of Music Therapy, which now has been combined with what used to be the national. Now there's just one. But back then, they had their offices at NYU.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to go into NYU every once in a while and do a lot of work and paperwork and things like that. And my principal at the Danbury Regional Center at the time was willing to be my supervisor. And at Southbury, there were two wonderful women who were music therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And they were older women. And so they were my mentors with that. And they made sure they loved the field, they saw the value, and they wanted to make sure someone younger than 50 at the time
Mm-hmm.
could continue it. So there were 5 of us.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, it's exciting to be part of something that's new, right?
Yeah,
Finding your way
yeah,
as a
you really felt
group
like a pioneer. You had the good and the tough,
Mm-hmm.
because it is hard to plow a new road.
Yeah.
But when you believe in it,
Mm-hmm.
you do it.
It's such a sense of purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know it's the right thing.
So I had first met you as a parent of a Holy Trinity student, and you were the music teacher, I
Yes.
believe, at that time. And
Yeah.
I know you said you also taught in the Meriden school system.
I was a music therapist for the Meriden school
Okay.
system, yeah.
And then tell us about the Pride program at Masonic here, because there you're dealing with an older group.
I actually moved into a classified position as music therapist, and then from there I went into gerontology. I
Mhm.
wanted to explore and experience, I guess, all the different areas
Mhm.
that music therapy could be applied, including psychiatric, did a stint in that. But at Masonic, I really loved my work there. They gave me wide berth to create new programs and initiatives, and one of them was Pride, and that was a program that you had for each person in that program, each member who lived there. I wanted to have a picture of them in their prime right next to their bedside. Some of these folks were pretty medically involved at that point and not necessarily responsive, because I wanted everyone, myself included, everyone who walked in there to greet them each day or to care for them or to whatever, to see the person, to see the real person, see the spirit within them, and not just see this elderly, frail body in a bed that needed to be taken care of, but to really see that person who loved and lived and did things and, had passions and anger and arguments and everything that's part of life.
Right.
I wanted them to see that. And then I got together with the families, and they would come in on Sundays. I wanted to find out what their favorite music was, kind of somewhere in their 20s, 30s, 40s. But I believe there's a part of us that totally understands what's going on around them. And if it were me, I would want someone to see who I really was. And so I wanted to do that for them, if that makes sense.
It does. And we had been talking earlier, and I had shared how one of our recent guests, one of the gerontologist professors at Central, talked about the reminiscent bump, where music that was part of our prime years.
Right.
She said, "You'll never forget the lyrics."
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm glad I was
Yeah.
growing up in the 60s, because, some people say that's the best music.
Yeah.
But that really resonates at a very deep level.
Yeah.
And so definitely
Yeah.
your, work there, I'm sure, was right in sync with
It
what the
was.
current thinking is. Yeah.
We were a little bit ahead of the curve. There was an encouragement and an atmosphere of initiative where we really explored. We were free to look at things, look at people, and see what we could do with the environment. We did a lot of stuff I hadn't really, until I talked with you, I had kind of forgotten about, but I remember designing a chair that would use sound waves and music that was important to the person to help heal and prevent bed sores.
Nice.
We were highly encouraged to do that. I drew up a proposal for a daycare. It went into effect after I had left, but it's there, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
There's an Alzheimer unit. That was another proposal we put together.
Yeah.
And one program, I love multi-generational, almost anything. And my mom and I got to do a project together where we brought in young children that she worked with in the summer from the school system. She ran the Title I program. She created it for Wallingford. And I would bring together the folks from Masonic, and we did a whole program together celebrating our differences and our commonalities. And they made a film about it, and I actually ended up speaking all over the country on that.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a great
Wow,
opportunity.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
It is cool, especially since you got to do it with your mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, as we're at a point in our lives where we have more to look back on, right, than when we're, say, 18 or 19, often we can see there was a crossroads, a decision. So if you could talk about your decision to move more into being an educator and therapist versus a performer on the road.
Right. Yeah, I had done that for a while as a young person in college, and it was a grind. But I had been given, once I started working at Danbury, I met a man. I had no idea who he was, but he sang. I didn't know at the time, but he sang for the Metropolitan, and he had students there, and he happened to visit the regional center and came in and said, I could help you sing better. What we all want to hear, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Who is this guy?
Right.
And I did end up studying with him. And one of the perks, I guess, of singing for the Met is that you get to present your students at Carnegie Hall. And I was preparing. It would take about a year or two with a few of his other students to sing a concert in Carnegie Hall. So we worked very hard for a while. And I wasn't sure, but I thought, well, what else?
Yeah.
I might as well go ahead with this. And at the same time, though, I had gotten my certification as a therapist, and I really wasn't sure which way to go. And my husband, then my boyfriend and fiance, he and I are great believers in prayer. And we brought this to prayer and, just simply asked God, which way should we go? And Steve came home the next day from work. He ended up being the deputy state auditor. He's now retired, but at the time he was an auditor one or something for the state. And he came home and he said, "Hon, you're not going to believe this. The state is offering a test for classified music therapists. They're going to hire a couple of music therapists." And I was like, wow, they never have before or since done that. And I took the test and tied for first and ended up getting hired in that position, which pretty much was a clear answer to me. I couldn't do both.
Right.
And it was a clear answer to me. And the one question I thought about Carnegie was, well, that's great, and that it's great to always be able to say that. But what about, that's like one day in your life.
Right.
I mean, you work hard for it, but it's like a couple of hours in your life. What do you do the day after? Do you go running after the next? I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go running after the next thing. I wanted to have a consistent purpose to my life.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Especially if someone younger or someone who's advising someone that's younger is watching.
Yeah.
And it's always great to have a story.
Yeah.
Share, I saw this woman on TV and here's how she decided.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So you're a Wallingford native.
I am.
And what are some of the things you're most grateful for, having had the opportunity to grow up in Wallingford?
There are a lot. I love this community. I think that's one of the beauties of it. While the storefronts might have changed, and there's been some development, I think it's been pretty wise development. It's not, we haven't been overrun by things. But most important, I think, is the feel of the small town that we maintain, the caring. Just this morning, a friend of mine, was trying to get donations for Master's Manna, and it's such an easy thing to do. So I threw it out to the theater and said, "Let's join this challenge. Let's do this." But that's just one little thing. But so many people in town do that. People are very generous in town to help. They want to help. They're good people, and I feel like I grew up. I mean, I suppose every kid, every teenager feels that way when they look back. I really feel like I grew up in the golden years of I was at Lyman Hall. It was one high school, and I had Mr. Crump and Mr. Vitale and Marion Lacey and Ronnie Granucci and Dr. Otto. And they really shaped and mentored my life once I hit high school to go in the direction that I did. And it was full of great value and character and integrity. It wasn't, do anything you can to get the part or do anything you can for this or this or this. It was more about honesty and character and doing the right thing and working hard for something
Mm-hmm.
and not feeling entitled.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Great.
Yeah.
So listen, the part I ask every guest is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Younger self. The 20s were challenging.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of scary. I wouldn't want to go back to my 20s. Because for the first time, you're not, before that, you're always told who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's you're a senior or you're a music major, or there's a label for
Mm-hmm.
you. Or you're Charlie and Eloise Kingsland's daughter, or
Mm-hmm.
you're number 5 in the family, that kind of thing. But when you hit your 20s and you're out of school, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would tell my younger self, take a deep breath, sweetie. Everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Trust yourself, trust your instincts. I think I would say that to first time mom.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do it right. You want to be that perfect mom.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize that there is no perfect.
Right.
There is no
Absolutely.
perfect.
Yeah. Most
anywhere.
humbling job in the world, I think. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Because you throw your heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
And the one decision I would applaud my younger self when I started to have kids was I decided we'd give up whatever we had to give up, but I wanted to stay home until they got to school.
Yeah.
And I know that's not always possible, but my generation didn't think it was possible either, And I found that the stuff we gave up that we thought we were going to miss so much, we didn't even notice, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So do you have a favorite quote or lyric or song?
Not really. I have, I do have a quote that I have has been important to me because I'm an introvert. People always laugh because they think introvert means shy, but introvert just means I'll take something interiorly and think about it before I'll say or do something. And we tend to be a little bit of a worrier, that way. But I think there's a quote that I really hold on to from the Bible, and it's, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's really been, for me, people would be kind of surprised because they see me out there in theater and everything else, but it really has, because I do take bold steps that kind of scare me sometimes, but I take them anywhere. So I think St. Paul's quote, I guess if I had one, it might be that.
Great. Well, listen, this has been terrific.
It's
We're at the
been so
end of
fun with
our
you, yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Please tune into your other fascinating women on future segments of Midlife Matters. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host. Thanks again.